Greetings, magnificent souls, to the Attract Health, Build Wealth podcast, where we have open and honest discussions about ourselves. This is a place where we break down, break away, and break through codependency, allowing ourselves to attract health, build wealth, and live a peaceful life. We are tired of being sick and tired. We are tired, but we are not giving up. We know that there is something magnificent inside of us. And because we are fighting daily, hourly, and by the minute, fighting ourselves, our kids, our spouses, we have to do things differently. We have to break the cycle. We don't have a million chances. We have to be happy now. We have to find a way. So how do we do that? How is that possible? If you look around at what society is telling you, they tell you that what we're doing is impossible. Yet it's happening every single day. And it's happening through the practice and the love that we call awakening the magnificent soul. We are all magnificent souls, and these are our stories of healing. Today in episode 36, part 2 of a 10-part series, all focused on control. Today, specifically, I wanted to talk about prioritizing others and others' needs before yours and explore a little bit about what this has to do with control. But before we get into the discussion, don't forget to let me know your thoughts about this episode, any feedback you have, or anything you'd like me to cover on future podcasts at epiphanyvault.com. Thanks again for all the great feedback on there. I'm getting through the Epiphany Vault. Much love to you all. And now on to prioritization. Big word, right? Big impact if you look at it from a codependent perspective. Have you ever felt that and I felt this before, that you ever give and give and give, that you tend to neglect your needs and put others' needs first? That maybe you latch on to different emergencies, projects, or crisis situations. Like maybe sometimes or always, are you always the helpful one in your relationships? And here's a big one for me. Do you sometimes feel empty in your relationships? Like maybe you aren't getting the same type of support in return. Do you identify or do you find identity in maintaining that type of role? Prioritizing others' needs before ours is a truly submissive characteristic of codependency. And why is that so hard? It's definitely been hard for me in the past, and it's hard for the friends and the moms that I know. And the thing about codependency is that it's a state of extremes. Of course, it's important to prioritize relationships in your life, like your husband, your kids, your ailing family members, your friend who is having a crisis, your work, your passions. The list really just goes on and on. But I think that the awareness that we have to have when it comes to prioritizing are the tendencies for that to get out of control. Sometimes it's easy to forget about myself when I have all of these other louder things asking for my time. For example, when does prioritizing become harmful to you and your well-being? As codependents, we tend to detach from ourselves, like we've talked about before, mostly unconsciously. Like we don't wake up one day and say, hey, I think today's the day I don't pay attention to myself, my wants and my needs. But in the end, I learned that I deprioritize my health and my well-being due to shame and fear. But shame and fear that maybe I don't have the love or I didn't get the love. And I have to give and give and give in order to receive love. We forget. We forget about ourselves. We tend to feel bad if we can't do everything to and for everybody. But why can't we have that same compassion and empathy for ourselves? Where can we find the balance of caring for others in the same way that we care for others? Care for ourselves in the same way that we care for others? Where can we accept people into our circles who provide nourishing and loving support in the same ways that you would do for them? For me, I can pinpoint my life of caring for others before myself by the examples I was given in my family of origin. I can't really say that I was ever taught to ask anything of anyone, especially when it came to emotional, mental, or spiritual support. But I think I learned to be everything to everyone by using the way that I acted, maybe the way that I looked, and especially the way that I cared about other people. And in looking at it now, I think it was a way for me to try and fill up my love tank because I wasn't feeling love for myself. I think I unconsciously thought maybe if I can do these things for these people, be there for them, etc., they'll like me and they'll show love, or they'll show like for me. Maybe if I just do this or do that, I will be able to feel full. What it turned into adulthood was a complete polarization of what I really needed emotionally, spiritually, mentally, from what I was getting in return, even from my inner circle. Because I was doing the wrong things. I was looking outside when I really needed to look in. I was trying to give and give and give because it worked. It was a temporary solution to fill my love tank. And I was getting those things ultimately. But what we know about codependency and the ego or the unconscious mind is that it takes a constant supply of those temporary solutions to keep you full. I think that's why I felt so empty and so lost. Why I was so tired, yet I kept doing these things and deprioritizing myself. Of course, what I realize now is there is nothing that I can say or do to fill up my love tank from the outside. Nothing. No one, no thing, no action is going to make me love myself. You can feel a temporary feeling of love and wanting, but if you're like me, you end up feeling more empty than full. That's because we're looking outside for love, when really it's all in us. Many times, the way we act is a reflection of us on the inside. We give what we can't get. And I see this play out in a lot of family environments, especially for moms. Even though I'm not a mom myself, I can definitely see how one could lose himself or herself in the constant upkeep of families. And I know it's not easy, but I also know that the effects of codependency are not easy either. And in fact, ultimately, I think they're harder. We work hard to find balance in our lives. And I totally empathize that it's hard. I've been there before, but if you're listening, you're worth it. I'm worth it. We're all worth it. So now that that's covered, I wanted to think about what does this have to do with control? Is it possible that because we're looking outwards for love, because we are trying so hard to fill up our love tanks, is over prioritizing and forgetting to prioritize ourselves our way of controlling the love that we get, even though temporary at times? Think about it. If we give what we cannot get, are we trying to control our environment, our love environment? Are we trying to do things automatically or unconsciously to fill up our love tank? I think so. Again, I don't think that we do this consciously. I think that it is deeply ingrained in us. But I think we make the unconscious choice of choosing where to focus our energies the way we do because that's what we know best. Does that make sense? Someone once told me, or I read somewhere, that a lot of things about codependency are about control. And it wasn't until I thought about talking about control here on the podcast and kind of going over my past actions and inactions that it now kind of makes sense to me. So if we're looking for love and can't find that love within ourselves, prioritizing others over ourselves is our way of controlling the love that we feel. Of course, we feel good about doing other things for other people. But if we are neglecting ourselves, what really is the point? And as I did in the last episode, I did want to take a look at the dominant aspect of this characteristic of prioritization and control, just briefly here. And I think it's pretty obvious that a dominant person in a codependent relationship tries very hard to outwardly control his or her relationships, situations, and the love that they receive overall. And I do think that many times a dominant personality will prioritize himself or herself over others. And going back to how codependency roots itself in extremes, the dominant one is on the other side of the spectrum. He or she has no trouble putting himself or herself first, even if it damages relationships. But the kicker here, and I think the crazy thing about this, is that dominant personalities do what they do for the same reasons that submissive people do what they do. He or she would demand love or loyalty because they don't feel it really in themselves. Again, a temporary solution to that problem. And can't you see where the submissive personality would fit right into this cycle? So, what can we do about this? How can we begin to grow away and out of this pattern? If any of this rang true for you and you think you are at the point where you're sick and tired of not putting yourself first, congratulations, first of all, because I think you're at the point that not many of us get to, in all honesty. For me, when I reached that point, I continued to read and educate myself. I listened to podcasts, read books, found online communities. I think as I surrounded myself with enlightened or at least aware people, familiarity of these situations started firing in my brain. I started to feel less alone, and I began to peel off the onions for myself as I consumed all of this content. And if you haven't listened to the episode on soul maintenance tools, I would recommend that you look at that one or you listen to that one for specific actions that I take. But I think just being aware of our tendencies is a good first step in the right direction. My soul maintenance time is a non-negotiable part of my day. Sometimes I amend it, or sometimes I have to skip it altogether. But in general, I do draw strict boundaries around taking that time for myself. I turn off my phone. I have no distractions as I read, I write, meditate, and reflect. And I would recommend that if you want to take action, that you try to start with one thing that really fills you up with love. Something that you can honestly say contributes to your soul, and find time to do that for yourself once a day. I say this with complete empathy and passion, but I warn you to be very aware of what this one thing is. And take time to ask why and how this is important to you and why this would benefit you. This process, it will not work if you can't be aware and willing to ask these types of hard questions. And if you can't do that right now, that's okay. I would recommend to go back to square one and immerse yourself in content until you can. And just coming from experience, I know that this is not easy, but I commend you for loving yourself enough to do this. That's it for now. Much love to you all. Living and loving.